Any more questions? Okay. So I'll move to the next. So the next updates, and actually I was supposed to make more progress on this, but I didn't. So we talked about static lineage support. So what we've been doing, what I've done is I separated a more like functional definition of exactly why we're doing we have this discussion on static lineage metadata emission, and we've been talking about how to evolve the event spec, especially. So there's some of the details on matches doc of that has been discussed on how to evolve the event to achieve this. But this doc is more focusing on the use cases, why we want to do this, how to represent it in the model, and keeping track of the static lineage. And so what I will do next is turn this Google Doc into a proposal on the Open Lineage repo and make it easier for people to comment on, and we can refine the definition of this. So to do a quick summary of this discussion, so Open Lineage at the moment has run events, so it captures transformation as they are running. And so you may have a SQL query running, and maybe it's scheduling Airflow, and every hour is transforming from one data set to the next. Like if we take a very simple use case, and it captures the runs, and as part of those runs, it captures information that is specific to the run itself, like how long it took, for example, some aspect like this. But it's also capture information that's more static toward this, what's the schema of a data set. So it's going to keep track when the schema changes, but the schema doesn't change all the time, or the inputs and outputs of that query doesn't change all the time, right? So in other cases, we have static lineage that we know about without necessarily the transformation running. For example, we can know about the definition of a BI dashboard, or we can know about the definition of a logical view in a database or a warehouse. And we can know of the lineage of those things independently of whether they have run yet or not, right? So the goal of this static lineage capture is to capture all those notions of lineage that we know about, even though they may not have been acted on yet, right? And it includes, you may have deployed a job that is copying data from one place to the other, and we know that statically, even if it has not run yet. Or it can be, a view that is defined. And that helps complement the lineage and being clearer on how we collect this information. It's still, Open Lineage still stay focused on capturing everything that is deployed, right, and exists physically, right? It's not design lineage per se, like it's not like a definition that has been entered manually, but it's capturing actual artifacts that have been deployed in production. And so the goal here is to enable, so the way we're capturing that is to enable a notion of capturing the job and the dataset metadata and the existing facets, but outside of runs in a more static statement about, here's a dataset update. We just capture that this is the schema of this dataset, or the owner of this dataset has changed, and you can capture that as a facet without having to have a run necessarily. And same thing for, we may know that a job exists and it reads from a dataset, right? So even though it has not run yet, or we know about it outside of runs, like for example, in the logical view. So this document goes in more of the details, and actually let me post this in the chat. So, the right window. And so this is the status of this. In parallel of this, we had a similar discussion on extending the spec for jobless run events. which is, so similarly, it requires evolving the events we're sending, because currently the run events capture recurring job of we require a consistent name for a job that recurs, that, for example, happens every hour. So it could be a schedule in Airflow, could be a DBT job, but something you run every hour or every day. And we capture runs as being part of a recurring jobs. And similarly, this is missing some of the things we want to capture. For example, ad hoc queries, whether people are using Jupyter notebooks or a client on a warehouse or a thing like that. Those things are one-off ad hoc events, and they also transform data. They might be producing data that is depended on by other things that might be automated. And therefore, we want to capture them in the lineage, but we don't necessarily want to pollute the job namespace by one-off name that would be generated, right? Or like user queries, right? So this is about capturing all those one-off non-recurring jobs, ad hoc queries, and this is really useful also to understand how a data set is used by people for ad hoc querying, for example. They may not be depended on by automated dashboards or things like that, but they might be used by people, right? So those are the type of use cases we can capture. It also enables us from capturing metadata from things like query logs that may not have the information about the recurring jobs, even though they are for our recurring jobs. But like the other metadata we capture on the jobs, for example, can connect the two and enable reattaching the metadata we get from query logs to an actual recurring job after the fact, right? Because, for example, in the Airflow SQL operators, we usually collect the query ID. And even if we don't have the full lineage at the time it's scheduled from Airflow, we might connect the query ID, have another integration that gets more accurate lineage from the query logs or other metadata from warehouses after the fact. For example, in the Snowflake integration with the access history, we can extract open lineage from the access history. And since we have the query ID on both sides, then it can be reconnected to the actual recurring job after the fact, which enables better lineage and those things to extend each other. So those two use cases are the main use case. And so basically the proposal is to make the job name mainly optional and for capturing things that we don't have a recurring job, so we can't provide an ID. And that requires also some changes on the market side for storing metadata. So those are the two ongoing proposals for updating, and let me post also this. And right now, they are Google Docs that you are welcome to comment on and suggest improvement to those spec in like use cases and why we're capturing those things. And I'm going to turn those into presentations, into proposals on the Open Lineage repo. So if we look at the Open Lineage GitHub, we have the proposals mechanism, which actually this one. Well, this is where we add proposals, and that's how we get reviewed and approve proposal to add to evolve the spec in significant ways to evolve things like this. And the documentation for the proposals is here. We need a README in this. Here we are. So the proposal process was itself submitted as a proposal to capture this. Here it is. So this is our process. And so I'll follow that to get to the next step. Like Google Docs are convenient for getting early feedback. and being more fungible. And then we move that to the proposal process inside of OpenLineage.